Jeddy Azuma, welcome back to the Uncivilized podcast. It's a pleasure to have you back on, brother.
Good to be back, man. It almost feels like I'm in a whole new era of life now. It's like we had a whole pandemic since we last spoke on this thing. So here we go.
Yeah. Oh man. Tell the audience, for people who haven't, and I'm going to post, if you're listening to this, I'll post his original conversation. But Jeddy, what are you doing in the world right now? I know you work a lot with men. I know you work a lot with rites of passage. But what's the thing, if you had to pick one that's inspiring you at the moment, what's lighting you up?
I think the simplest way to say it right now is I'm working really hard to initiate immature men into mature masculine leadership. So I think that's the biggest shift that we need to see in our society right now. There's a lot of ways that I'm going about that. And I have a 10-year-old son who's right there too. So it hits home even in an extra special way. But that's probably at the heart of my work, and what I'm being called into right now is taking that charge.
Let's define immature. In your words, in your view, what are you seeing? How is this playing out in society? What's immature masculinity mean to you?
Yeah, I've been reflecting on this a lot lately because I'm actually in the process of writing a book and preparing for a TED Talk. So
Beautiful.
The differentiator for me, I remember, happened very clearly when my son was born. I remember when I first laid eyes on him and I held him in my arms, it felt like a cellular shift in my body. And even in that moment, because I was 27 years old when he was born, I could recognize that something fundamentally had changed in me. And as I thought more about it, I realized it was the moment I went from thinking about myself and prioritizing me first, even though I was already married, right? I already had responsibilities as a husband. But when my son was born, it was completely different. If I leave the room, he may not be okay. With my wife, I can leave the room and come back. Sure, she is depending on me, but it's not the same as with a child.
Yeah.
And for me, that was that big differentiator that really launched me from adolescence into adulthood, was recognizing I can't prioritize myself anymore. It can't be about me. So that's one of the clear lines I draw. If we're looking for yes, no, 0, 1, black, white, do you consistently prioritize yourself over others? Even if you don't want to admit it, what's the truth, right? That's, to me, one of the main differentiators. We can go into qualities and characteristics, but that's kind of the essential distinction point.
Let's tease this out a little bit. I agree with you that there's immature and mature masculinity. I like that framing versus toxic versus whatever real men nonsense. Yet, how many fathers are still stuck in really immature patterns? So it sounds like that moment kind of initiated you, but what are some other ways, or why would there still be a group of men, a large group, and we're seeing this play out across the headlines with the Epstein files and everything around that? Why would how do I ask this question? A lot of guys who are responsible for other people are still stuck in immature patterns. How do you see that playing out?
I think that some men are treating their family as the obstacle. And I think that's one of the fundamental breakdowns that men need to learn how to shift, is if I see my wife as the obstacle to what nourishes me, if I see my kids and my responsibilities as a father as an obstacle to what nourishes me, then I haven't really started to take full responsibility for myself. I'm just feeling bad about my circumstances and looking to project responsibility elsewhere. So this is really a conversation about responsibility. If there's things that nourish me, and I have to find time and space for those things while being a father, a husband, and among many other things, I take responsibility for that. I make sure and guarantee that that's there. And I don't treat my family like the opponent. I think that's where a lot of guys get stuck. And I've been there before too. I'll be the first one to raise my hand. It's not like I've figured this all out and I'm perfect with it. There's times where sometimes you need to step over the crying child to go to the gym and take care of yourself when it's hard, Instead of treating our family as the adversity, we have to learn to hold the tension of all of it. My father-in-law has been in men's work for 40 years, and he talks about the mature masculine as being able to hold the dynamic tension in moments. And I think that's another really good indicator of that mature masculinity.
Say more about holding the dynamic tension, if you would.
Well, there's going to be so many moments in our lives, right? Forget about, because there's some guys who may not be a father, right? Let's just say that you're a mature man, you're an adult. You've got responsibilities. You got people who are counting on you. And those responsibilities, they pull me in every direction. They pull me deeper into my marriage. They pull me into my relationship with my kids. They pull me into my career, into my personal self-care, fitness, health related, whatever. There's so many directions we get pulled in, and I'm at the center, right? And I have
Mm.
to hold the tension of those things to make sure I don't get pulled too far off of my center in any one direction. And that's the thing I think happens to a lot of men, is one of two things. Either I haven't defined clearly enough what that centering place looks like for me. What is the correct amount of balance in each of these directions that allows me to feel whole and anchored and rooted in the middle? Um,
Mm.
and I think even if they do know what that is, they're not good enough at boundarying or creating boundaries around that space. So I end up getting pulled off my center. I get pulled too deeply into my relationship. I end up resenting my relationship because I think that's the thing that's pulling me away from center, or any one of the other things, right? It could be any one of
Mm.
those things. So holding the tension means I can hold my ground in my relationship if my partner's pulling me further than I'm willing to go.
Mm.
And I also get to do that with all different types of moves, right? I don't have to be an asshole, right? I
Yeah.
don't have to be a dick about it. I have to be able to work with humor and all these different dimensions of
Mm.
my masculinity. So that, yeah, that's that dynamic tension I'm talking about.
What does it feel like, Jeddy, for the guy who's listening to this, who doesn't have your languaging and doesn't have your training and doesn't understand sort of the philosophy of this? What does it feel like when the tension is winning? And then what does it feel like when the tension is being held skillfully and in an attuned fashion? Can you kind of walk through when it's not and when it is and the difference between the two?
Yeah. It makes me think of those strongman competitions. You've seen the ones that they have on New Year's Day where they're like lifting the Atlas balls. And I think of the one where they're holding those two concrete pillars. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, it's so
Right.
awesome.
And
Yeah,
so
and
they
it feels
hold
like their
on.
shoulders are
It's
going
so,
to get ripped out of their bodies. Yeah.
oh my God, it's incredible, right? But there's
Yeah.
that moment where they're holding on and then they release the security bars that are holding them.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you can see the tension build up. You see it
Mm-hmm.
on the person's face, but they're still holding steady, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a visual for what it looks like. For a man who's really holding that in his life, you can tell that you're being pulled, but you never feel like you're off balance. And for me, that feeling of being off balance is when I know there's something in my life that I'm not tending to. It's a
Mm-hmm.
visceral feeling. I can't say it in a way that your brain can understand, but your gut knows it. You
Yeah.
you know in your guts when something's not being taken care of. And I think that's something even guys who don't have the language can
Mm-hmm.
connect to. You know if something's off. And if you start resenting the people around you or even resenting yourself, that's when you got to start asking the question, why? That's not a normal state. That's not a normal state for anybody to be in resentment. So I think those are probably indicators that anybody can identify.
Okay. And then what does it feel like when I don't want to paint the perfect day, but I definitely have days where I'm like, man, things are just moving easily in and out of my schedule, my in and out of my life. Conversations are good. I'm happy. I woke up well. What does it feel like for you? So again, if we take a guy who's kind of new to all of this and the word balance is hit or miss with him, what does it feel like for you? Is it just like on point? Is like what are some other words we can use for these guys?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest. I mean, I've got two small children. I've got a 10 and a 7-year old. My wife and I've been married for almost 12 years. These days we're talking about here, they come few and far between,
Yeah.
So I don't want to paint this rosy picture where, because I think even balance, right, is a momentary
Sure.
thing, right? To
Yeah.
achieve balance is a practice, but actually being in balance like happens in a snap, and then all of a sudden we're off balance again.
Mm.
Um, so I don't want to create any illusions here. I think the more normal state is that we're being pulled in these directions, and some days things feel a little bit off. So I tend to treat those days that, like you described, where everything's just clicking,
Yeah.
that's just a blessing, dude. Like those days, I just say a couple extra gratitude prayers, and I'm like, thank you for that one because I needed
Yeah.
it.
Please let this come
um,
back. Yeah. Yeah.
I think what's more realistic is that there are more days where there is that tension, where I'm like, you know
Mm.
what, I didn't get the best out of myself in my work
Mm.
today, or I could have performed better, but that I'm still able to find gratitude and acceptance for that kind of day
Mm.
too. I think that's
Mm.
actually the ultimate objective. It's not to have a series of perfect days, because come on,
For
man,
sure.
that's not realistic. I
Right.
appreciate those days, but to also find ways to be grateful and to flip it from a problem into an opportunity, right?
Mm.
If it didn't go great today, cool. Well, what can I do to adjust? What do I need to do differently? I wake up a little bit earlier tomorrow, or work
Mm.
a little bit harder in the gym next time, instead of like letting that drag me back. And I think that's also an indication of mature masculinity, is that I've noticed over the last decade, especially, that voice in my head that used to be so mean
Mm.
has gotten a lot more amicable.
Mm.
He still holds a high standard for me, which I appreciate. I don't want that
Sure.
to go away, but he doesn't beat the shit out of me every day.
Mm.
That's the difference. And I think that's another sign of mature masculinity, is I don't need to beat myself up in my head over and over and over again anymore, because I have another way to motivate and improve myself on a consistent basis.
Let's stick on this point for a minute, because I think this is really important, Jetty. I've gotten insight into the inner dialogue of a lot of men and thought that is absolutely atrocious and abusive and horrible, the way that you speak to yourself. How did you shift from an immature, and let's frame abuse, self-abuse, as immature here, and kindness and care as mature? How did you start to shift that languaging for yourself over time? And for the guy listening, like, how does he start to shift that languaging for himself?
Well, it's a few things. I mean, first of all, I had to become aware of it. That voice had been in my head my whole life. And
Mm.
until I started sitting around other mature men in a safe environment, I thought I was the only one. And then they started to help me see, oh, that's just one option. I don't actually have to talk to myself that way. So the first step is
Mm.
just being aware of it. I think there's a lot of guys who are doing that to themselves, that they don't really know or recognize the impact that it's having. And I would say that's number
Gotcha.
one. Number two, I also recognized that that voice served a really valuable function for many years.
Mm.
It allowed me to get as far as I've gotten. I motivated myself as an athlete in my academics from that voice. So it made it that much more risky for me to consider
Mm.
changing it, because that was my ace in the hole. That
Right.
voice in my head was my secret sauce for getting high performance out of myself.
Yeah.
So I also needed to replace it with something that could provide the same or better outcome with less consequence and cost.
Mm.
The last piece was having more mature men around me who modeled compassion
Hmm.
and gentleness.
Right.
To see that, especially men that I respect and admire, guys who I saw were already high performers, showing me that, dude, you don't need to beat yourself up that badly to get a
Mm.
better result.
Hmm.
And them modeling that for me started to become the voice of the father in my own head. I
Mm.
talk about learning to father ourselves. That's part of this maturation journey for men. I've taken the voices of all these wonderful men I've heard over the years and turned it into a voice that now lives in my head and has kind of
Mm.
replaced this really abusive adolescent dude who just who used to just rip me a new one on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I think it's some combination of all that.
Can I ask, Jetty, personally, was that the voice that was given to you by men around you when you were young? Is that where you absorbed that?
Honestly, I don't think so, because, I think a lot of times it's easy to say, well, maybe it was the voice of your father or
Sure.
a
Or a
baseball
coach.
coach. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was a combination of a lot of different voices, but my dad was never really hard on me like that. And I can
Okay.
honestly say that I was way harder on myself than anybody around me. I don't blame my mom for this, but there was a high priority placed on academics and academic
Mhm.
performance. And there's some messages that I took from her about grades that I
Mm.
amplified to the 10th degree. So
Gotcha.
I think it was a lot of me hearing the message and distorting it into what I think I needed to hear in order to perform better.
Oh, wow. I appreciate you saying that, because so often the common conversation is that's dad's voice, or that's, like you said, the coach's voice or somebody's. But a lot of guys then will say, like, well, I don't know whose it is, so therefore it must be valid, as opposed to, I can
Mm,
clearly identify that this was my stepfather's voice, and if I can eradicate him from my mind, I'll be okay. But just to
mhm.
know that you may constitute it from a number of other voices, I think is a really powerful statement. I'd say, especially now, when a lot of the male influencers have a harsh tone. Like I've never met David Goggins. I would shake his hand and thank him for his service, but then would also say there's probably a lot of young men who beat the shit out of themselves and call themselves names because of your work. And perhaps some of them got off the couch and went for a run that morning, which is great. And yet, how many of them, there will never be enough runs and enough accomplishments to quiet that same voice. So I appreciate that you're saying this around the idea of maturity, because I think we all go, yeah, that's not quite the best way. There are times I know it. I was an athlete where coaches were like, get the fuck up and get in the pool or whatever, get your ass to work. I had fight coaches that were like that, like, all right, get back in there. And there is a maturation process that says that's an unsustainable fuel source, right? That
Yes.
at some
Yeah.
point,
It's not sustainable, man.
it's not. Yeah. Jeddy, let's shift a little bit to the idea of initiation, because when you spoke of holding your son for the first time, you and I share the same language around initiation. And I've also looked at the world we live in now and go, oh, it's run by uninitiated men. So much of the hurt we're experiencing and watching and seeing play out is a lack of initiation. I don't know. Did you watch the Manosphere documentary?
I did. Yeah,
I did not, because I know it'll just make me want to slam my head on the desk 50 times. But I feel like the feeder system for all of those influencers is uninitiated boys. So I would love for you to speak a bit to our audience on what does initiation mean to you, and how are you seeing the lack of it play out in society? And then a third question, if we can remember all three, how are you seeing it in individual men whose lives you may be around?
Yeah. Well, help me track these. I think I got it.
Okay.
The first thing is a lot of these influencers on that documentary, they're the ultimate result of a generational legacy of immature masculinity, right?
Mm.
And what Bill Plotkin would say, I don't know if you're familiar with Bill
Mm-hmm.
Plotkin and his work, Nature of the Human Soul. He talks about the bottleneck at the
Mm.
gate of adolescence. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the best way and simplest way to describe what's happened to men who have
Mm.
not really matured into mature masculine leadership, is that they're still stuck in adolescence. Back to what I said in the beginning, they're prioritizing themselves and their self-interest before anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's another aspect of what we have, is that we have a legacy of men who are stuck at this bottleneck of adolescence. They're older, they're fathers, they're corporate executives, politicians, everything, but they're still psychologically adolescent, right? So
Yeah,
that's another piece. How am I doing so far? How many questions did I answer?
that
Two,
was good.
maybe?
Uh, what does
Okay.
initiation mean to
Initiation now,
you?
right?
Like in your languaging,
Right.
and let's speak to the guy who has never read a single men's book. What does
Mhm.
initiation mean for you to, how would you explain it to him?
So I usually use rites of passage and initiation side by side. And so I'll
Okay.
talk about both. With
Okay.
rites of passage, it's essentially, I think of chapters in a book. That's probably the best metaphor to think about this. Think of your whole life, and it's a chapter book. And every chapter is a season. It has a specific purpose. There's a role that you're playing. There's a stage of development that you're living out. There's a whole narrative that builds upon the story from chapter to chapter. Rites of passage happen at the moments in between chapters. So the
Mm.
three parts of a rite of passage happen when you finish the chapter of life that you're in, the season you're in right now, and you go through some sort of ordeal, and that brings you across the threshold into the next chapter.
Mm.
Not always, but oftentimes an initiation also happens at that gate of transformation. And so let's just say boyhood to manhood, or adolescence into early adulthood. I'm being initiated into the next chapter of my life by people who are on the other side, who have
Mm.
gone through that, who have matured through that threshold, who've been guided across that threshold by others who went before them. That's really what initiation is it's being welcomed and ushered across into a new stage of life by others who've gone before you. And I
Mm.
think that's where that bottleneck comes in again, is there's too many of these men who are sitting at the bottleneck, who are
Mm.
pseudo initiating this next generation of boys into manhood, but they haven't crossed that threshold themselves. Is
Mm.
that a simple enough a way to put it, you think?
I'm going to tease it out a little bit. I want you to talk about
Okay.
how some chapters have initiations and some chapters don't. And I'm
Mhm.
curious if there's a difference when someone changes chapters with an initiation or changes chapters without an initiation.
Yes, the easiest way to describe that is that there's some rites of passages, because a rite of passage is really a transformational process. Some
Yeah.
of those occur and there's nobody around. It could be a near death experience, right? You can get lost hiking in the wilderness for several days and have to find your way out of it. That can be an ordeal that launches you from who you were to who you are on the other side of that
Mm-hmm.
experience. Just becoming a father, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not always a circle of fathers standing around you when your child's born.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not necessarily a formal initiation into fatherhood, although I would say going from not being a father to holding my son when he was born was absolutely a transformational moment for me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I bring those two words into the fold, because to me, rites of passage and initiation have distinct roles and features. I think initiation specifically is meant for when we're imbuing members of our society, members of our community, with a specific role and responsibility to the people, right? We're initiating you into a very specialized role within the community. Now in adulthood, we were initiating boys into the responsibilities of taking care of a family, looking after
Mm-hmm.
the village, going out and hunting and protecting the people. But there's also initiations for elders where we say, hey, time to hang it up, pops. Like, we got it from here. Let us soak in your wisdom and take care of you. So there's different initiations, but I think it's more around the role within the community as opposed to the internal change that's happening within somebody.
Would you define the internal as a rite of passage?
The internal change, you mean?
Yeah. Like, how would you define? Because
Yeah,
let's take your example of fatherhood for an example.
sure.
There wasn't a group of men who sat you down beforehand and were like, Jeddy, this is what's coming. This is what we expect from you. This is what's going to happen. There, you're holding your child. Welcome. You're now Papa Jeddy as opposed to unpapa Jeddy, who you were half an hour ago. But yet you
Mhm.
went through what you've defined as like a very transformational moment. Would
Mhm.
you say that holding your child was a rite of passage or an initiation or both?
That's a great question. I would say for sure it was a rite of passage for me, because
Okay.
it's a death and a rebirth, right? It's a closing of a chapter and the beginning
Mm,
of a new one, and
yep.
I very much can identify, like I said before, even on a cellular level, that I was not the same person from one moment to the next.
Yeah.
It
I believe
happened
you.
in a moment like that. Um, I would say that I was. It was a bit of an initiation too, because I was being initiated into different roles and responsibilities. Now I'm the caretaker of a child, and it
Right.
and it may not
Right.
look like a ceremonial initiation, like I mentioned before, where there's people around who are saying you are now a father, Jeddy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's very real responsibilities and role changes that happened as a result of that.
Yeah.
Now, here's a contrary example of just a rite of passage, right? Um, when I was 25 years old, I knew that I needed to leave my life on the East Coast because I was looking for something. I was looking for myself, and I
Mm,
didn't really know it, but I was looking for something. That was
mhm.
very much a rite of passage journey for me, where I went and I had a number of different experiences, but I wasn't really initiating into anything just yet. That happened
Mm,
a couple years afterwards, but it
okay.
was very much it was a no going back to who I was moment.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. In my series of questions, I think the next one was how are you seeing the uninitiation of primarily the masculine or men playing out problematically societally?
Mhm. I think the bigger issue is that there's not enough modeling and mentoring happening.
Mhm.
I think that there's ingrained ways of being a man in
Mhm.
leadership, being a man with power in modern society, that have steered us too far in one direction.
Mm.
So when it comes to initiation, I think it's that there's not enough of the good examples or the better examples standing on the other side of that gateway of adolescence to
Mhm.
show what it could look like. And I think that's probably the most important work that anybody can do. I don't care if you're a men's coach or some sort of leader or facilitator. Just be a good dude. Be an
Mm,
example of an honorable, integral man. Clean up your messes when you make them and repair them in an honorable way, right? Do the
mm,
right thing when nobody's watching. And if we all just did that, it would start to shift this narrative that, oh, I can actually be a successful man and fulfilled man in this world without cutting corners, without
mm,
cutting people off at the knees and
mm,
pushing people down or out of the way while I find my path to success. I think that's the biggest thing is we just need more examples of that. So, because
mm.
a lot of guys, they don't think, and honestly, cutting corners is easier. You know,
Right.
it's a more comfortable pathway for most people. It's harder work to
Yeah.
do the honorable and integral thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I- I'm seeing it play out in some interesting ways as well. And it feels like, and maybe it's just because our circle is men's people, men's work people, men's leaders, that the the giant question mark of like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? How could this be that men are still essentially acting like 14-year-old boys in 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old bodies? How did this, like, oh my gosh, is starting to shift a bit to, developmentally we have an entire set of generations that's adolescent. What went wrong? Or what can we do to shift that rather than just poking at the behaviors, like the specific we have too many guys playing video games, we have too many guys looking at porn, we have too many guys, etc., where it feels like perhaps, and this is my glass half full view, is that we're starting to wonder what is the root of this.
Mm.
And it almost feels like there's not quite a critical mass of men who are even interested in this to say, shit, we need elders. We need elders. My generation, like I just turned 50. Where are my elders? I have two of them. Where are your elders? What are the guys who perhaps aren't having kids or are in this work preparing for? Just to sell our men's work businesses in 5 years and retire? No, no, no. There's going to be a position that's held. Jeddy, let me swing this now back away from the community, away from society. Again, for the guy listening, the specific man listening, who's going, shit, I don't think I got an initiation. From the men that you've worked with over the years, how are his behaviors or his distortions playing out in his life in an easily identifiable way so a guy could hear you and go, oh shit, that's me? Do you have a set or
Mm.
some set of characteristics or behaviors you can talk about?
Yeah. Well, I think just to give an example, we've taken plenty of guys who are in their 40s, 50s. We've even taken out a 72-year-old man to be initiated. So I would say that it's never too late.
Mm,
And the threshold that you're marking for yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be the threshold from boyhood to manhood. It could just
yeah.
be I'm ready to launch myself into this next season of my life. And when
Hmm.
we take people out to fast with us on a rite of passage, what we're really doing is we're creating ceremony around that experience, and we're bringing a lot of intention and deliberateness to that transition. So oftentimes the guys who are called to this, they're already feeling the stir happen. They're already getting, there might be a major life event like a divorce, a major health scare,
Hmm.
uh, career change. Like it could be a number of different things or things that might be looming that
Hmm.
are starting to suggest, hey, it's time to change.
Hmm.
Right? It's time to shed this skin. It's time to take on something different. It could be more subtle,
Hmm.
right? You could just have that sense that you've been a little bit stuck, and you look back, you're like, man, what has actually changed for me in the last year, the last 3 years, the last 5 years? Have I
Yeah.
actually changed? And if not,
Mm.
that's the kind of thing that will bring a man to say, I got to do something. And a lot of times they think they need to do
Mm.
something more drastic or more
Mhm.
specialized, and sometimes that's the case, and that's usually where I'll talk to a man. I'll ask him, well, what's the purpose of doing this? Because really the
Mm.
purpose of engaging in a rite of passage is I am ready to leave the identity that I've been behind. That's what it is. I'm laying to rest who I've been, preparing myself to be in the void of really not having an identity and suspending myself in the soup for a minute,
Mhm.
with trusting that there will be a new identity and a new calling that emerges on the other side of
Mhm.
this. So I think anybody who's feeling the stirrings or the inklings of that,
Mhm.
when, because if someone's listening to this, they're either nodding their head like, yup, and I had something like that helped me get to where I'm going, or they're nodding their
Yeah.
head like, yup, damn, I need something like that.
Yeah. Talk to me about some of the specifics of, like, let's look at your specific wilderness rite of passage. Will you walk us through the major elements of it and the intention behind the major elements of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I already gave my favorite metaphor of the chapter book, right? So
Mm, mhm,
we actually have it's almost a 6-month process where we really
mm,
help a man prepare during the period of severance, is what we call that first stage, where you're getting ready to let the identity die.
mm,
So we have a whole bunch of processes that you go through, a series of calls and conversations with the guides who are leading you and the other men that you'll go out and fast with. It's really about clarifying, what is the purpose for really doing this? Why are you going out there? So that you're very clear when the time comes. And also identifying the parts of yourself that you're leaving behind. You're not packing those in the pack with you when you go out to go on your fast. So there's a whole 3 to 4 months of preparation that we do leading up to that experience. There's 4 days and 4 nights that you ultimately spend alone in the wilderness without food. We allow you to have water, but no tents, no shelter, just very minimal equipment. And for those 4 days, it's really just you and
mm,
nature. And it's probably one of the few times, if maybe the only time in a man's life, where there's virtually no other distractions for you. And you're meant to sit there. You're meant to really tune in and hear what that voice inside is trying to tell you. It's
mm,
screaming at you. What's it saying?
mm,
After you come back from those 4 days, you're received by your guides, who are then there to witness you. This is the initiatory part. You're being witnessed coming back across that threshold,
mm,
and you're walking into a new stage of your life, and you're being witnessed and received by men who've gone before you. And that's a really powerful moment. You share your story. The men help to mirror that and reflect it back to you. And then the most important part of the whole process, everybody sees the 4 days, 4 nights alone, no food. Whoa, that's crazy. The real
yeah.
work begins the moment you start going home, because now you
Mm,
have blank pages and it's time to put
mhm.
ink down. So what are you going to do with that? And if we just said, hey man, have a good life, good luck, high five, you did it, these guys are going to go back to society and have a really hard time. It's going to really struggle with what we call incorporation. So we provide
Mm,
2 months of very specific integration support, like helping them anchor their story, return home, educate their community on what they went through, because it's also
mm,
a very unusual thing for most
for sure.
communities. And then within Rising Man, we've created a network for men for life, an incorporation support community for life, where we've taken out 130 guys in the last
Mm,
8+ years.
beautiful.
And it's there for guys. We have annual gatherings, we have seasonal incorporation calls, small incorporation teams for guys who really want to work on incorporating their vision. So I was always taught by my teachers that that's the most important part, because otherwise it's just
Mhm.
a cool thing that they did sometime. If you really want
Right.
it to land, they have to have a place to practice.
It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. I don't want you to break confidence or confidentiality, but can you share just some of the transformational pieces? Are you able to generalize around some of the things that you've seen from men, how they walk out and then how they walk back? Is that a fair question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if they'll be as specific as you're hoping for, but
Sure.
the the thing that I always say, because people always one I love guys, right? Men are so logical. They're like, what am I going to get out of this? And
Right,
so a
right,
lot of
right.
times, guys, I ask them, what are you afraid of, right? And they're like, oh, I'm afraid I'll do this thing and nothing will happen. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, let's talk about that. What are you expecting to happen? And ultimately, you realize that a lot of guys are, if they're doing something, they want to know what's the return going to be.
For
And what I
sure.
usually tell them is, hey, I can't tell you what your experience is going to be. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But what I can tell you is that every single man, and I've taken out over 100 men myself, I've seen every single one of them come back, and they all say, I'm so much more clear on what I need to do
Mm,
next. Every single
mhm,
one of them, clarity is the number one thing. I've seen
mm,
guys come back. I've seen guys who were hesitating to lean into a relationship, step forward, and decide that, and just have this realization: what have I been doing? This is the one. I need to step into this relationship. And I've seen that. I've seen similarly. I've seen guys say, "This is not the right person. I need to step away. I need to, I've seen guys start businesses. Guys have uh, launched into entirely new paths in their lives.
Mhm.
And the key is that it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, we encourage guys not to make any major life decisions in at least the first 3 to 6 months, right? Like,
Yeah.
just take it slow, bro. Like,
Yeah. Let it
just
sit.
it's like learning to walk, take it easy. But
Yeah.
listen, of course.
Mm.
And remember that incorporation it's the slow burn, right? This is a
Mhm.
long man's game. This is where, again, the mature
Mhm.
masculine knows it's not about quick, hot, massive action. It's the
Mhm.
long game. So what
Mhm.
does the long game ask of you? And that's another thing I see. Guys embrace that idea of, okay, this is an endurance race. This isn't a sprint, and they start to walk with more deliberateness every day.
Beautiful. Jetty, what is your relationship to the word soul?
Soul and spirit, they kind of live side by side for me. I tend to prefer spirit these days. I don't know
Mhm.
why. It just resonates more with me. But in terms of soul, I think that that's my or anyone's access point to something that connects all of us, and I think regardless of what anybody's spiritual beliefs are, I think it's pretty inarguable that there's something that connects us, even if it's just energetically, right? Even if it's,
Yeah.
I mean, even the fact that we're connected economically worldwide
Yeah.
now, like, that's just another expression of soul and spirit. It might be a very modern and confusing one at times, but
Mm.
to me, soul is that unique part of the fingerprint that I have to this thing that connects all of us.
The reason I asked, and I'll tell you a quick side story, super fast,
Sure.
about the connectedness. Did you ever work with Robert Masters? You know who that is?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
He wrote the
I've heard
book
the name, never worked with them.
To Be a Man,
Mm.
and a couple other books on shadow, on spiritual bypass, etc. He was my entry point into men's work. I read To
Mm.
Be a Man. I looked him up. He was doing a workshop in my town. I went to that. I thought it was going to be a lecture. It was six guys in a yurt doing like the deepest shadow work for a week. And he has been quite unwell. And yesterday I thought, I should shoot him an email and just check in, see how he's doing. And the day got away from me and I didn't, and woke up this morning and found out from his wife that he had passed. And so here you're
Mm.
talking about, are we connected on, is there something else going on? Well, shit, I thought about the man on the day that he passed. So the reason I'm
Mm.
asking the question is I'm really curious about this exploration right now, personally, of the relationship specifically that men have to the idea of soul or their own soul or the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And it
Mhm.
sounds like some of what your rite of passage work is doing is connecting them to a deep, like, call it whatever the fuck you want, but
Mhm.
connecting these guys to a deeper part of themselves, or a deeper, more primordial part of their being, that they then can draw knowledge, not information, like life knowledge from. Is that an accurate breakdown of some of what's happening in these rites of passage?
I recently had the great pleasure of meeting a man named Thosh Collins. Have you heard of Thosh or seen his stuff
Mm-mm.
out there? He's a
No.
Native American fitness influencer, among many other things. I mean, he's a brilliant, super tapped in dude.
Right
Um,
on.
his people come from the Salt River reservation down in Arizona, and he shared with me that in his language, in their native language, there's not actually a word for spirit. And he was explaining to me
Hmm.
why. He said, because it that's just an automatic for us. He's like, we don't need a word for that because we just know that that already exists. We don't need a word to
Hmm.
describe it. It's understood that
Hmm.
there's a breath that moves through all things. A
Hmm.
lot of other indigenous teachings that I've had the great fortune of being around over the years are constantly reminding us that this thing that is composed to look like a human is just
Yeah.
borrowed dirt and molecules that's arranged itself for like a snap of the fingers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you really get into like, he was also saying, Thosh was also saying that quantum physics is about the closest thing to Native American spirituality that modern humans have created. And if you
Gotcha.
really think of it on a quantum level, that's probably the most logical masculine way to think about it, is that there's, the same water that is composed in my body was water that, who knows, like, has got how many times it's gone up into the atmosphere and
Mm,
down into the
hmm.
rivers and moved out
Mm,
to the oceans. And when you think about that, at least for me, I remember when I was having my own spiritual awakening, I had to consider spirituality on a logical level for a moment. And for some reason, that really helped it land. It's like, oh, wow, the
yeah.
water I'm drinking has been here forever.
Mm,
And it's probably the same water that my ancestors were drinking. Whoa, that created a bridge. Cause now I'm like, wow,
mm,
that's a connection point. And there were some of these
mm,
logical insights that I had that I feel opened the door to the
mm.
abstract and the ethereal that we just can't quite hold in our hands. We can't put our fingers on. So
Yeah.
you asked me how that connects to initiation, right? And rites of passage.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Like, are you, is that work dropping men into access to something that's older? And
Yeah.
and by older, I don't mean 30 years ago. I mean,
Mm,
10,000 years ago older.
yeah. Well, one of the things we encourage men to do, because again, 4 days, 4 nights, nothing to do. It's like, well, what do I do out there? That's another one of my favorite man questions. What am I supposed to do? Yeah, one of the things we encourage them to do is remember that you're a part of this. Like,
Mm,
another word that most indigenous peoples don't have a word for is nature,
mm.
because they never saw themselves as separate from nature, right? It's like, why do I have to point to that thing and say, well, that's nature, that's natural?
Yeah.
Well, what am I?
Mm,
If that's
right.
natural, and then what am I? Am I some sort of, I don't know, whatever. That's probably another podcast for another day. People
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
that too. But but yeah, just seeing yourself as a part of it. And one thing that does happen for most people who go out and do these fasts with us is that you sit there, and after a couple of days, at first, the let's say you're in the forest is a little bit unsettled around us, because it's not,
Mm,
we're guests, right? We're not
mhm.
the natural inhabitants of that particular piece of land. But after about 48 hours, the environment treats you like one of its
Mm,
own,
mm,
right? And the animals start to get a little bit closer to you, and
mm.
they start to move through your camp as though you're just someone else in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
and at first they avoid you a little bit, like, whoa, who's the new guy?
Yeah.
um, but after a little bit of time, so we really encourage guys to recognize and see themselves and I'd say that's actually another, I don't know if I could confidently say that's unanimously in the experience, that everybody
Mm,
has that experience out there, but
yeah.
many men come back and say, whoa, I feel like I'm a part of this thing now.
Mm, mm. Okay. Jetty, let's talk about community. Let's talk about rites of passage, initiation, and what feels like a separateness that is almost reached perhaps its peak in society, a separation. One of the things you and I chatted about before hitting record was your belief that we're going to be returning to more smaller group, community based living. And the last
Mm-hmm.
time even you and I recorded, I think you were living on a piece of land with a couple other families, raising kids together.
Mm-hmm.
Share with the audience some of the ideas that you have of where you see us going societally in relationship to community. And does rite of passage work and initiation foster that?
Well, I'll start from the end and work my way back. I absolutely think
Okay.
rites of passage and initiation are a requirement for healthy
Mm,
societies. I'll say why in a little bit. I
okay.
think a couple of things. Number one, the most valuable resource on the planet for humans is trust. And the reason why is because we have to lean on trust and faith in other people in order to build deeper relationships. I think that so much harm has been done from
Mm,
human to human over many, many, many centuries and over many, many, many years, to the point where we don't inherently give people trust. In fact, we question people's motives more than we offer them trust, right?
mhm.
Just the goodness in humans, right? When was the last time that we collectively all just believed in the goodness of humans as the reference point,
Right.
as the starting point? Like, I
Right.
trust you, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I think there's also a little bit that I've been guilty of myself, of glamorizing and glorifying what the old days were like. I mean,
Mhm.
there's plenty of evidence that suggests that humans have always been territorial as well, right?
Mhm.
Like there's always been conflicts over territory, over resources, but not in the same way that it is now, right? If there
Mhm.
was spark ups, it wasn't let's just completely decimate the other tribe and
Right.
take over. It was always let's just establish the borders around what we need for ourselves. And
Mm.
oftentimes there was also very amicable resolutions to things because both sides recognized, hey, it's not in either of our best interest to
Right.
try and annihilate the other peoples because we're both going to lose when that
Right.
happens. And I think that was more achievable when we lived in smaller villages and smaller communities, 100 or a couple of hundred people where trust is just a given because for
Mm.
generations and generations, you've been taught and it's been modeled for you that it's not about any one person. It's the people, the people, the people. We, the people, is the most important thing. And that changed at some point. When it became
Mm.
me, the person, over me, over we, the people, is when
Yeah.
civilization and society started to struggle.
Mm. And do you think people feel that, Jetty? Like, do you think a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, nah, that's not true? Or just they've grown up in a system where the individualism was the way. So it's kind of like asking the fish, like, are you in water? Like, no, this is just how I am. Do you think that's recognizable societally?
I think it depends on who we're talking about. I think about
Okay.
Sebastian Junger's book Tribe. Have you ever read that
So
one?
good. So good.
Oh,
So
I
good.
think everyone should read it. It's literally
Yeah.
140 pages. You can read it in 3 hours
Yeah.
or less. Um, it talks about our natural compulsion to rally together as humans, right? And there's
Mm.
plenty of examples in that book. I'm not going to try and conjure them up in my memory, but many examples where when things go down, we look for each other, right? The
Hmm.
best of us comes out when shit hits the fan because we're social beings. There's no arguing it, right? We don't have the biological equipment that's required to be more independent animals on this planet, right? If we didn't work together, there's no way we would survive. It's inarguable. So you ask, is that something that everybody can connect to? I think so. I think the problem is that
Hmm.
usually there's too much in the way, whether it's
Mm.
culture that's in the way, whether it's family legacy that's in the way, or generational wounding, or the construct of modern civilization. There's a million things that can get in the way of that. But I think at the core of every human being, and I really mean this, every human being's core desperately wants to be in deep, meaningful community and
Mm.
collaborative lifestyle with each other. You can argue with me till the end of time. You will never convince me otherwise because I've just seen too much evidence of it. And I think the people who
Mhm.
say otherwise or act otherwise, it's because there's so much in the way interfering with that signal that they can't make contact with it anymore.
Mm. How do you see us returning to that, Jetty? As technology separates us further, as division seems to grow rapidly through social media and the legacy media, like, how do you see us returning to that?
Yeah, well, at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist or putting my name on some sort of list that I'm probably already on somewhere. um, I know the AI bots are listening.
Right.
You know, all jokes aside, I think we've proven that this large scale society and civilization experiment has failed. I think there's plenty
Mm.
of evidence of that. I think it's also clear that it's not sustainable and it's already beginning its crash. So I think what we're going to see is more and more people that start to organize themselves into smaller coalitions, small communities, small towns. I think that local legislation is going to be much more important over like the executive branches and legislative branches of government that are overseeing millions of people.
Right.
I don't. I have no idea of exactly how we do it or what's the timeline. To me, it feels like many multiple generations of that,
Mm.
and maybe some things that happen outside of any human influence or control that's going to drive us in that direction.
Mm.
But I think that as far as what we do as humans, what I do, I'll just make it about me for a second, right? What do
Sure.
I do as a human to influence this? I start at home with my family and
Yeah.
I imbue those values into my children and I align those values with my partner. And then we start to see we make invitations, right? It's like my vision right now is to just focus on the things I love, because I know I'm a good dude and I've got really strong values. I'm not perfect, but I'm somebody who you'd be lucky to have me as a friend, and I can say that with as much modesty and humility as possible. And inviting people, say, hey, this is what I love doing. This is what I believe is good. Do you want to come along?
Mm,
And invite people
mhm,
into that journey, because I know that naturally that's going to create magnetism and community around me wherever I go. And I think as more and more people emerge who do those types of things, you're gonna we already see it, right? There's like here in Austin, right? There's the biohackers, and there's the running club, and there's all the people who organize are starting to organize around the things that they love. And you find out that that's just the starting point.
mm,
Eventually that spirals deeper into more reliable relationships and connections.
mhm,
So I think
mm,
that that's how it's going to happen. I think the best thing we can do right now is educate our children
mm.
to kind of revitalize some of these principles around collaborative lifestyle. Even personal development. I'm starting to be like, I don't like that word. Let's talk about collaborative development. How
Yeah,
do we all develop together? It's not just about me. That's what
right.
adolescence is for. Develop yourself
Mm,
personally through adolescence. Let's help children self actualize. So when we initiate them into adulthood, they can realize it's about the community actualizing itself. And then if we can do that for a few generations, now we've got some momentum, you know?
yeah, beautiful. Let's put a pin in it there, brother.
Boom.
For people who want to work with you, people who want to do rites of passage, people who want to read this book that I'd love to get my hands on, where can we send people?
Well, risingman.org, at Rising Man Movement on Instagram. You can hear about everything that we're doing by going there. My personal stuff's going to be at Jeddy Azuma on Instagram. I'm just in the early stages of the writing and getting ready process. But if you want to follow the journey, because I am sharing and experimenting with some of these ideas through my content. If you want to hear more about that and engage with me, hit me up over there.
Beautiful. Thanks for being here, man. I always love our conversations. Cheers, man.